Hello, my name is Nigel Bowden. I'd like to welcome you back to lesson number 6 in our series of MikroTik scripting, and this is actually part 2 of lesson 6. And back in part 1 we were creating our Telegram reporter script, so we're going to dive straight back into the coding to carry on where we left off. Okay, I'm just going to switch back into VSC, and in the previous part we actually created our initial variables that we needed. We created our debugging function, and now we're going to get into the next part of the script. So I'll just go to my copy and paste screen, which I'm having a little bit of difficulty accessing. There we go. So the first thing we'll do is copy in this block of code here. What we're doing here, we're actually doing our usual debugging message just to say that things are kicking off and we're processing the Telegram queue. The first thing that we do is that we need to have a look at the Telegram queue variable. We can't make any assumptions about its status, what a data type that it is. We assume that one of the other probes will have put a data value, one or more data values in there, and that the Telegram queue will be an array variable for us to process. But there is a chance somebody may have changed something, maybe it hasn't been created yet, and if it's not there and not the correct type, we could actually run into problems in the rest of our code sort of trying to process it. So the first thing that we do is we actually use the type of command, which we've seen previously when we've been checking for data types. So we check that the Telegram queue global variable is actually an array type. Well, we check that it isn't, if it is, or if it isn't an array type. So this is if the array type is not, if the variable type is not equal to array, there's obviously something wrong with it, and we will basically reinitialize it using this method here. We've seen this previously. We can use the toArray with an empty string method to create an empty array, and then we'll also just output a message to debug to say that we've had to do some work on the array to fix it. Sorry, the Telegram queue variable to fix it up. Okay, hopefully we won't hit that very often, but it's just a sort of error checking sort of mitigation for any problems later on by having an incorrect data type there. Okay, next thing that we are going to do is probably the most difficult part of this entire script, and this is one, it's going to be a bit of a head scratch and take a little bit of time to work through. So I'll paste in the whole block of code. Okay, here we go. So let me scroll back up here. As you can see, it's quite a long block of code, and the thing about this code, we actually probably only run it, it only gets triggered once. The purpose of this block of code, starting at line 26 and it goes all the way down to line 64, so quite a bit of code there, but the whole purpose of this is to check whether or not we have the chat ID that we need. If you remember, I said that to talk to the bot we need two things. We need the API key, which will be hard coded in, and we will always have that, but we also need the chat ID, and we need to get the chat ID from the bot itself by interrogating the bot and talking to it for the first time. Okay, and what we actually do once we get that chat ID, we will actually assign it to a global variable, which should be a one-time operation, and then all subsequent iterations or every subsequent time we run this script, we'll already have the chat ID, so we don't need this code again. So if it wasn't for the fact we didn't need to derive the chat ID, we wouldn't need all of this and the complexity. But if ever the chat ID global variable gets removed at some stage, we will automatically recover from that and still be able to use the bot. Okay, so first thing that we do is use the len command that I covered in the previous video, and we check to see whether or not chat ID has got a length of 0, and if it's a length of 0, then we haven't got a value yet. So we need to take some action. So we will send a debug message to say we haven't got a chat ID, we've got to do something about this. And then, so what we will actually do, we create a URL to call a method called getUpdates. So this will actually we're basically talking to the bot and say, just send me what you've got. So you can see we've sort of concatenated the chatbot URL that we specified at the top of the script. We've added on this path of /get updates and says to the bot, just send me something. And we've got another variable here, bot response, which is where we will keep the response from the bot that we get. Now, hopefully this on line 37, well, from 36 down to 43 looks pretty familiar. If you think back to what we did with the web monitor, it's very, very similar indeed. And as I said, you know, if you think about, if you're not familiar with APIs and API calls, you can think of them very much as a browser talking to a web service. And you can see from this, it is very similar to our web monitor, where we're actually using the tool fetch to go to the URL that we created, and we will get a value that's sent back in the same way that we, instead of getting a web page back there, we'll get a block of data. But it's very, very similar. And we've employed the same techniques again. You know, we can't assume that this is going to be successful. And if it did fail, as we saw with the web monitor script, the whole script would exit, and it would just fail with no error message. We wouldn't know why it had failed. So we again wrap it in this do on error structure, so that if the fetch fails, we will actually create an error message. We will log it into the local logging system, send a debug message, and we will actually cause the script to exit at this point. There's not much point in proceeding, because we can't derive the value that we need. So this would be a sort of fairly catastrophic failure, but you would pick this up in testing anyway. So that's this is actually retrieving the data we need from the bot. Okay. We then got a couple of debug messages to say this is what we got from the bot, and you can see very much as we did in the web monitor script, we're using the toString command to convert the response, which is again in an array format. And we can actually, the information or the field that we need from the response is a data, a field called data. And we'll actually, when we run the debugging, you'll actually see this in a bit more detail, because we'll actually run through the whole process and see how the chat ID is retrieved. Okay, so we take the response from the bot, which is an array, and then we pull out the data field. And it's very similar to what we've seen before in the previous web monitor script. Okay, we will actually take the data field from the response, and we'll assign that to a local variable called bot data. And then within that, within the bot data, we will actually look for a string to see if it's present, which will indicate that the chat ID that we need is present. I mean, it could well be we get a response and it doesn't have the data we need, and you know, we can't do much with that. So what we do is we use the find command that I talked about in the previous video. We look at the data that we got back, and then we actually look for this string of information here. I won't explain this in any detail, but this is just a particular string which exists within the data that's returned. If it's available, then we can actually use it to extract the chat ID string that we need, which is what we do on the next line. So we can see we set the chat ID variable here, and remember the chat ID is a global variable we created at the top of the script. What we do, we use the pick command to operate on the bot data that we got back from the API call that we made. And what we actually do is we pick out the string that begins at the chat ID start value that we got here. You remember we did a search to find out where that special string exists, and I just know from analysing the response that if we take this position and add a value of 13 to it, and we actually supply a second parameter, which is the endpoint that we want to extract to. If we take that same variable and add a value of 23, so it's sort of a 10 character field that we expect, then we can actually pick out the chat ID that we need to send with the token where every time that we talk to the bot. Okay, we then do a debug function to say, well, this is the chat ID that we've extracted, and then we come to this piece here, which is the regular expression, which I mentioned in the previous video. And what we do is we say we've got this chat ID here that we've extracted from the response to our call to the Telegram service. We check to make sure that none of the characters are anything but the characters 1 through to 0, or the numbers 1 through to 0. If any of them were not a numeric character, so if we had the letter A in there, or maybe a question mark or a slash or anything but numeric characters, then we would get a true match here, and we would then create an error message, log it into the local logging system, and again we have to exit at that point because we can't proceed with the with processing the chat ID and making any subsequent calls to the Telegram service. It's a sort of catastrophic failure. Hopefully we won't hit that, but if something bad did happen, then that would be a way of failing gracefully, and we would have to investigate to see what's going on there. Okay, so that's a lot of words, but basically we are checking to see if we have a chat ID. If we don't, we make a call to the Telegram service, we extract the chat ID that we need, we do some basic checks to make sure it's in the format that we require, and if it is, then we can proceed with the script. And so we'll go to the next part of the script. I'll do a bit more copying and pasting, and here we go. I will paste this entire block in. Okay, so now we have our chat ID, and just remember that initial block, we only ever really run it once. So most of the time that you run the script, this will fail because the length of the chat IDs is greater than 0. Then we miss out this entire block of code, and we go straight down to this section here, starting on line 66. So we just do a debug message saying, yep, this is the number of entries we have to process in the Telegram queue. We're using the len command that we spoke about in the previous video. And then we are going to use the for each loop that I discussed also in the previous video, where we basically start our for each loop here. We create a variable which only exists within this loop called message. We actually feed in the Telegram queue array, and for each entry in there, so each entry in Telegram queue will get assigned to the variable message, and we will then send each one of those error messages to the Telegram service. So what we do is we create a message URL. So this is how we have to structure the data to send it to the Telegram service. Again, you'd need to check the API documentation to understand the format of this. Now, I won't cover it here because it's just going to take too long, but we basically create a message URL. We then have a couple of debug messages saying that we're sending a message and what that message is actually going to be. And then again, we have a very familiar structure here, which is the tool fetch method, which we use to actually send the data that we've got. Okay. If there's a failure for some reason, if the format of our API call is incorrect, then we've got this on error branch again, so that we can indicate, that there's been a problem. We would log it and flag it in debugging. Okay, so hopefully this all hangs together pretty well and makes some sense to you. So by the time we've run this particular block here, we will have stepped through each of the entries in the Telegram queue array, and we will have sent them to the Telegram service. So by now we should be seeing these messages popping up on our Telegram application. I think there's a little bit more code for me to paste in, just some tidy up at the end of the script. So basically what we need to do at the end, we need to just reinitialize the Telegram queue variable. We don't want it to, if we left all the values in there that we'd just processed, then we would just they would just stay there forever, and we'd just keep reprocessing them, and every time the script ran, we'd just be sending more and more and more, because we'd be repeating all the previous values that were in there. So we basically clear it out with this set command. We send a message to say, yep, the script is completed. Well, we debug, if we've got debugging enabled, we'll send a message into the debug function, and then we just do a bit of tidy up on those global variables, debug and debug func, so they're not hanging around in the script. So let me just put a comment in there. There we go. Okay, so we're pretty much good to go with that. So I will save that. Okay, but we're not actually going to run it yet because we don't have a chatbot to test it on. Okay, so the next thing that we really need to do is create our chatbot. So we'll go through that, and then I think this is probably going to be enough for this video. We'll probably have to have a part 3, unfortunately. This one's probably already running pretty long. So let's go to chatbot and do the setup process for the bot. Sorry, we'll go to Telegram and set up the chatbot. So I'll just go to my notes here so I can tell you exactly what needs to happen. So I need to have my Telegram bot going. For some reason it's not running. Let me just find that Telegram app. I'll open that now. And here we go. I've got the Telegram the Telegram app running. And I'll just make this window a little bit smaller if I can, so we can have the two side by side for testing. There we go. Make that a little bit smaller. And I'll just get rid of this file listing here. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is search for a special user called Botfather. So BOTFATHER. Type that in there, and you can see the results that are returned. Have to be a little bit careful. There are a few similar named users out there, but the one that we want is the first result, and it's all one word. If you notice that, then you can't go too far wrong. It's got a little blue tick next to it. Now, before I go any further, I'm just going to turn off my picture in the bottom corner so you can see everything that's going on. So I'll click on Botfather there, and then you can see there's a little bit of information about the account there, but the thing to watch out for is the start button at the bottom. So we'll click that, and then that gives a summary of all the different commands that you can submit in the entry box at the bottom there to do different things with Botfather. But the one that we're interested in is the command new bot. So we'll type /NEWBOT and then hit return, and then you can see we're prompted to start entering some information. So first thing is to give it a name, and we can that's just a locally significant name, just a label for us to use when we're seeing our list of users. So we'll just call this one MikroTik, and oh, I've misspelled, let me do that again. MikroTik bot. There we go, and we'll know what that is when we see it in our list. There we go, and then the next thing that we then need to do is we need to create a name which is globally unique amongst all of the bots that exist on Telegram. This is one that will be publicly sort of viewable, and so you need to create something which is completely unique, and this can take 1 or 2 attempts. You know, you may enter a name which you quite like the sound of, and then you find that somebody's already using it. So just to keep it nice and unique, I'll just create one called MTik NB, and then what's the date today? It's the 14/05/23. And that's a little bit random, but you know, if you put something fairly unique that's significant to you and is very unlikely to be copied by anybody else, then I also made a rookie mistake there. I got told by BotFarther that it's got to end with the letters BOT, so I'll just type that again. MikroTik NB14/05/23_bot. There we go, and that is now globally unique, and it's in the right format. And you can see now you get a message, you get a link here that you could click on if you want to go to the bot and have a look at it, but we're not quite ready for that yet. The thing that we really need is to get hold of this API token here, which is the thing we're going to be using to talk to the bot. And we've already spoken a couple of times about the API token and the chat ID, but this is our most important piece of data, and we need to make sure we copy this. So I'll do copy selected text, and then we'll go back to our script over here, and where we've got our token variable here, we'll paste it in here, and this is the key to accessing our bot and being able to send commands into it. So I'll just save that. There we go. And so now we've got all the information that we need to talk with the bot. So next I'm going to just click on this link here so that I can go directly to the bot and see it in the application. And here we go. You can see it's called MikroTik bot. And this will be one of the list of users that I have when I go back to when I start chatting with it, and I have my list of users who are reporting messages to me. So that's pretty much it for the moment. I think we're probably going to leave it there because this video is running a little bit long. We'll have a part 3 where we actually start looking at testing the bot and making sure we can get all of the information that we need from our scripts and make sure the bot is receiving the information as we would expect. So hopefully this has been interesting so far. The next part is going to certainly be a culmination of everything we've done so far when we see the bot receiving messages from the scripts that we've created, and we should see some alerts from our MikroTik device via the probe scripts and the Telegram reporter that we've built over the past few episodes. So look forward to seeing you in episode number 3 of this lesson. Take care. I'll see you soon.